He was lying in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, with wires attached to his chest and a tube delivering oxygen through his nose. I sat beside him like I always did, holding his hand, whispering soft reassurances that everything would be all right, even if I was not sure I believed it myself anymore. It had been 10 years, 10 long, draining years, of sleepless nights, endless appointments, and sacrificing every piece of myself to care for the man I loved. I had given up my job, my dreams, even parts of my identity, to be his full-time caregiver. I had believed that love meant staying even when it hurt. But that afternoon, as I reached into his coat pocket to retrieve his phone to silence an alarm, I saw a message flash across the screen. It was not the words that struck me first, it was the photo. A woman I had never seen before, standing beside a man who looked just like my husband. He was healthier in the image, smiling broadly, and holding a child no older than 6. My breath caught. My chest tightened. The message below said, "We miss you, baby. When are you coming back?" Froze. My hands trembled. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over, praying I had misunderstood. But deep down I knew. This was not just a mistake. This was not a delusion. This was the beginning of a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I had spent 10 years nursing a man who had not only lied to me, but had built an entire life somewhere else. And now I had to face it. Began with the small things. First I thought he was just tired. He would come home from work and collapse on the couch, complaining about aching joints or headaches that never seemed to go away. He was not the type to whine, so when he started mentioning his fatigue more often, I took notice. There were mornings when he would stay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling like he could not summon the strength to move. He began forgetting things, little things like where he left his keys or what he had eaten for lunch. First, we both laughed it off. Everyone forgets things, we told ourselves. But the laughter did not last long. Over time, his energy disappeared altogether. He began missing work. He lost weight. His once strong frame looked gaunt and hollow. He struggled to keep food down, and there were days when he would barely speak. I urged him to go to the doctor, and he promised he would, but weeks passed and nothing changed. One night, he collapsed in the hallway. I found him lying there, confused and weak, struggling to stay conscious. That was when the fear took hold. That was when I knew something was terribly wrong. We began a long journey through hospitals and clinics, waiting rooms filled with silence and cold fluorescent lights, test after test, blood work, scans, specialists. Every doctor had a different theory, and each one ruled out only brought more questions. I stayed by his side through it all, holding his hand, offering reassurances, even when I was drowning in worry. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, we were given a diagnosis, a rare autoimmune disorder that attacked his body from the inside out. It was progressive, unpredictable, and incurable. The doctor's voice was calm and clinical, but his words landed like hammers in my chest. Life as we knew it would never be the same again. We drove home in silence. I watched him from the corner of my eye, his face blank, his hands trembling slightly in his lap. I wanted to say something, anything that would make it better, but I did not know how. What do you say when your life is suddenly rewritten? When your future becomes a question mark? Within weeks, he could no longer work. The medication made him sick, the pain made him irritable, and the fatigue never left. I tried to keep up with everything, my job, the house, his appointments, but it quickly became overwhelming. He needed more care than I could offer part-time. I remember the moment I made the decision. I was at work, sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a spreadsheet while my phone buzzed with updates from his nurse. He had fallen again. He was refusing to eat. I sat there, tears burning behind my eyes, and I knew I had to choose. I could not do both. I could not split myself down the middle and expect either side to survive. So I quit. I handed in my notice and walked away from a career I had spent years building. I said goodbye to coworkers who did not understand, to a routine that had given my life structure, to financial stability. I became his full-time caregiver. His nurse, his therapist, his housekeeper, his only support. The days began to blur together. Mornings were spent checking medications, measuring blood pressure, helping him bathe. Afternoons were filled with doctor's appointments and insurance paperwork. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake beside him, listening to his shallow breathing, afraid he would stop at any moment. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped going out. I stopped doing the things I used to love. There simply was no time, and even if there had been, I had no energy left to enjoy anything. People told me I was strong. They said I was doing the right thing. But in the quiet moments, I felt like I was disappearing. I missed the woman I used to be, the one who laughed easily, who made plans, who felt alive. Still I stayed. I reminded myself that this was love. This was what commitment looked like. In sickness and in health. We had said those vows, and I intended to keep them. There were brief moments of light. Days when he would smile or thank me, when he would look at me with the same warmth he had in the beginning. Those moments kept me going. I clung to them like a lifeline, convincing myself they meant something, that he appreciated me, that he still loved me. I did not realize back then how easily love can be mistaken for duty, or how easily a life built on sacrifice can hide secrets buried deep in the cracks. I believed we were in this together. I believed that my devotion meant something. I had no idea that while I was pouring every part of myself into caring for him, he was living another life, one I would soon discover in the most devastating way. But for those 10 years I gave him everything. My time, my health, my heart, and I never thought to question whether he deserved it. Every morning began the same way. I would wake before the sun, quietly slip out of bed, and make my way to the kitchen to start the day. The kettle would hiss as I prepared his morning tea, careful not to use too much sugar. He had developed sensitivities, and even the smallest indulgence could trigger nausea or dizziness. Then I would line up his pills, tiny capsules and chalky tablets in labeled compartments. Some he took with food, some on an empty stomach. I had memorized the schedule by heart, a rhythm I could follow even in my sleep. After that came the bathing. On good days, he could sit on the stool in the shower, and I would help him wash his hair and back. On bad days, I would have to lift him out of bed, supporting his weight with my shoulder, gently coaxing him into the bathroom like a mother guiding a child. Dressing him was a delicate process, one that required patience, because his joints were stiff and his skin bruised easily. There were days when he winced with every movement, and I would hold my breath each time, trying not to show how much it broke me to see him in pain. Then there were the appointments. So many appointments. Some weeks we had 4, sometimes 5, all with different specialists in different parts of the city. I kept a binder filled with his medical records, prescriptions, and lab results. I became fluent in medical jargon, learning to interpret test results, advocate for treatments, and challenge doctors when I felt something was overlooked. I sat in waiting rooms for hours, flipping through outdated magazines while watching the clock. I carried snacks, water bottles, and emergency supplies in my purse like a soldier preparing for war. Our life was consumed by illness. There was no space left for anything else. My own needs faded into the background. I stopped going to the gym, then stopped going out altogether. Friends stopped calling. Invitations to weddings, birthdays, and dinner parties stopped arriving. First, I missed those things. I would look at photos of old friends on social media, smiling at events I could not attend, and feel a sharp pang in my chest. But over time, even the loneliness dulled. Became normal. Financially, things grew tighter each month. With no income from either of us, we relied on disability benefits and savings that quickly began to dwindle. I sold my car, then started doing small tasks online. Virtual assistant work, editing, anything that paid a little and could be done from home. My parents helped when they could, but they were older and on fixed incomes themselves. I hated asking for money, but I had no choice. Every new medication, every new piece of equipment, bed rails, special chairs, lift supports, came with another bill. He grew quieter with each passing year. The man who had once filled a room with laughter now barely spoke. I tried to believe it was the illness, the pain, the medication, the exhaustion. But there were moments when I felt him slipping further away. Sometimes I would sit beside him on the couch, reading aloud or trying to start a conversation, and he would just stare at the wall, not even acknowledging my voice. When I asked if something was wrong, he would shake his head, then go silent again. Intimacy faded too. We had not made love in years, but more than that, we stopped touching. Even a simple hug felt foreign. I tried more than once to revive something between us. I would dress up for dinner, cook his favorite meals, light candles. He would offer a small smile, but there was no spark behind it. The meals would go half-eaten, and he would retreat to bed early, claiming fatigue. Eventually I stopped trying. It hurt too much to be rejected over and over again. Still I stayed. I told myself that this was part of the journey, that he was sick and struggling and needed my patience. I reminded myself of our vows, our memories, the years we had shared before everything changed. I had given up so much already. Leaving now felt impossible. But even in my blind loyalty, there were moments I could not ignore. Times when things did not add up. He began taking calls in the other room, then deleting call logs afterward. I once saw a receipt in his jacket pocket for a restaurant in a part of town we never visited. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said a friend had picked up something for him. Another time, I found a lipstick-stained tissue in his coat. I told myself it must have been mine, though I could not remember the last time I had worn lipstick. He started getting packages, small boxes with no return address. When I asked about them, he brushed me off. Once, he said they were from an old coworker. Another time, he claimed they were medical supplies, though I never saw the contents. He began locking his phone, something he had never done before. I asked him about it, gently at first, then more directly. He would always deflect, accuse me of being paranoid, or say that I was stressed and imagining things. I began to doubt myself. There were nights when I would lie awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself everything was fine. I would go over every moment of the day, every word he had said, every strange little detail. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the stress was making me suspicious. Maybe the distance between us was just part of the illness. That was the story I told myself over and over again because the alternative was too painful to consider. But in my heart something felt wrong. I did not want to believe it. I had built my life around this man, wrapped every piece of my identity around his care and comfort. If something was truly wrong, if he was hiding something, then everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed would feel like a lie. And I was not ready to face that. So I kept going. I continued the routine, held on to the structure, buried my questions deep inside. Because sometimes it is easier to cling to the life you know, even when it is crumbling, than to confront the truth you are not ready to see. I told myself that if I just held on a little longer, things would get better. I did not know then that the cracks were only growing deeper, and the truth was already slipping through them, waiting to come to light. Started like any other day. The morning was quiet, the same soft rustle of the curtains as the sun crept in, the same beeping of the machines I had learned to sleep through. I rose early, made his tea, prepared his pills, and gently helped him sit up. He was quiet, but that was not unusual anymore. His silences had become part of the background noise, something I had trained myself not to take personally. I helped him to the bathroom, prepared his breakfast, and then, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I heard his phone vibrate from the living room. It was not the sound that caught my attention. It was the way he suddenly moved. Too fast for someone who could barely rise without help. He had already picked up the phone by the time I walked in, but the screen was still lit. I saw only a flash of it, a name I did not recognize. It was not one of his doctors, not one of his friends, just a woman's name accompanied by a heart emoji. He turned the screen away quickly and began typing something, his fingers shaking, though I could not tell if it was from the illness or something else. I said nothing in that moment. I did not trust myself to speak, but something shifted inside me, a cold unease that did not leave. For the rest of the day, I watched him more closely. He avoided my eyes. He kept the phone close, even during meals. And later, when he had fallen asleep on the couch, I picked it up. He had changed the password. The man who had never bothered locking anything now had a passcode on his phone. I stood there, holding it in my hand, staring at the screen like it could answer the questions swirling in my chest. My mind ran wild. I tried every number I could think of. His birthday, mine, our anniversary. But nothing worked. I set the phone back down and walked away, but my hands would not stop shaking. Later that week, I found a receipt in the laundry. He had asked me to wash a pair of pants he had worn during a recent outing to the hospital. As I emptied the pockets, a folded receipt slipped out and fluttered to the floor. It was from a boutique shop across town, an expensive place, one I had never set foot in. The purchase was dated just 3 days earlier and included a woman's scarf, perfume, and a small stuffed animal. My chest tightened. I sat on the floor for a long time, staring at the paper, willing it to make sense. When I asked him about it, I tried to keep my voice calm. I held up the receipt and simply asked, "What is this?" He barely glanced at it before waving his hand dismissively. He said it was nothing, a gift for a nurse who had been kind to him. When I pressed further, he grew irritated. He told me I was being paranoid, that I needed rest, that I was reading too much into everything. He turned it back on me, his voice rising, accusing me of invading his privacy, of not trusting him. I walked away from that conversation feeling ashamed, like I had done something wrong. But the seed of doubt had already taken root. And now it was growing. In the days that followed, I began to pay closer attention. I watched his behavior, his mood, the way he clutched his phone when he thought I was not looking. He had a new habit of taking brief walks outside, claiming he needed fresh air. Sometimes he was gone for 20 minutes, sometimes nearly an hour. I followed him once, staying far enough behind that he would not notice. I saw him standing by the corner near the mailbox, talking on the phone. His face lit up in a way I had not seen in years. I could not hear the words, but I could see his expression. He was smiling. That night, while he was sleeping, I sat at his computer. It was an old laptop, one he barely used anymore, or so I had thought. I tried his usual password, and to my surprise it worked. I searched through his files, his browser history, anything that might explain what was happening. First, there was nothing. Just old documents, medical files, bookmarked recipes we never made. But then I saw a second browser installed, one I had never noticed before. My stomach dropped. When I opened it, the truth began to reveal itself in pieces. There were emails from an address I did not recognize, exchanges going back months. He had created an entirely separate email account. The messages were personal, intimate, full of affection, and they were not meant for me. One message caught my eye. It was recent, just 2 days old. "I miss you. She is starting to ask questions. I will try to see you both next weekend." Froze. She is starting to ask questions. That was me. He was writing about me. My hands moved on their own, clicking through folder after folder, each message a nail driven deeper into my chest. Her name was Emily. There were photos, selfies taken in a park, a dinner table set for two, a child's drawing with the words, "I love you, Daddy," scrawled in crayon. Child. A little girl with his eyes and a smile that made my stomach turn. Her name was Ava. She was 5. Could barely breathe. I clicked through the photos, the birthday parties, the beach trips. All recent. All within the years I had been caring for him. I stared at one picture for a long time. Him holding the little girl on his shoulders, laughing, alive in a way he had not been with me in years. I remembered those same dates, those same weekends, when he had been too tired to speak, too sick to eat, when I had spoon-fed him soup and changed his bedsheets. It was all a lie. He had not just been hiding a woman. He had been hiding a life. My head was spinning. I felt like I had stepped into a dream I could not wake from. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, the weight of the discovery crushing down on me. 10 years. 10 years of sacrifice, of loyalty, of believing that love meant staying. And all the while, he had been living a double life, smiling in photographs with a child I never knew existed, whispering promises to a woman who was not me. The next morning I could not look at him. I moved through our routine mechanically, saying little, avoiding his eyes. He must have sensed something was wrong, but he said nothing. That silence, more than anything, told me he knew I had found out. But this was only the beginning. I had uncovered part of the truth. Now I needed to understand all of it. Because something inside me had cracked wide open, and I could no longer pretend it was not real. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I finally spoke. I had made him breakfast, out of habit more than anything else, and set the plate in front of him like I had done every morning for years. He thanked me with a weak smile, then began picking at the scrambled eggs. The silence between us was heavy. My chest felt tight, my hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the counter. "I saw the emails," I said quietly. "And the photos." He looked up slowly, his fork suspended in midair. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not surprise, not fear, resignation. As if he had known this moment was coming and had simply been waiting for it. I know about Emily, I continued. I know about Ava. He set the fork down gently and leaned back in his chair. There was no immediate denial, no frantic scrambling for an excuse, just a long, slow breath. He rubbed his face with his hands and then looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in a long while. I never meant for you to find out like this, he said. His voice was hoarse, tired, but still familiar. The voice of the man I had loved, the one I had cared for through every ache and fever, every long night and terrifying hospital stay. The voice of the man I thought I knew. You were not supposed to find out at all, I asked, my voice breaking. You were just going to let me keep feeding you, bathing you, giving you my life while you had a whole other family behind my back? It was not like that, he said quickly, but I could already hear the hesitation, the scrambling. Then how was it? Snap. Help me understand, because I have been here every single day, every single moment for 10 years, and I cannot begin to imagine how this happened without you lying to me over and over again. He looked away then, unable to meet my eyes. There was a long silence, and then he finally began to speak. It started before the diagnosis, he said. A year or so before. We had been distant. I was traveling for work a lot. You remember that, right? I nodded stiffly. I remembered. He had gone on more business trips than usual, and I had been the one left behind, keeping the house in order, waiting for his late-night calls from hotel rooms in cities I never visited. I met her at a conference, he said. It was not supposed to be serious. I was lonely. I felt disconnected from everything. From you. From life. My breath caught in my throat. So you cheated. He winced. I did not plan it. I swear I did not. But we kept in touch. Listen. She made me feel seen again. And then you got sick, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. He nodded. That is when I tried to end things. I told her I had to focus on my health. But by then she was pregnant. The words hit me like a blow. I staggered slightly, my hand reaching for the back of a chair to steady myself. You got her pregnant, I repeated. While I was here, loving you, trusting you. He looked down at his hands. I did not know what to do. I thought it would all end there. But when Ava was born, I could not walk away. My vision blurred, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. So you chose both, I said. You chose to have both lives, both families. I tried to make it work, he said. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I kept everything separate, no one would get hurt. I laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound that felt like it came from someone else. No one would get hurt. I gave up everything for you. My job, my friends, my entire life. I became your nurse, your caretaker, your advocate. And the whole time you were sneaking around with another woman, raising a child that I knew nothing about. I never wanted to hurt you, he said again, but the words felt empty. You let me wipe your sweat, clean up after your illness, fight with doctors for your treatment. And you used that same fragile body to fly across states and hold another child in your arms. His silence was answer enough. Were you even as sick as you claimed to be? I asked, the thought suddenly stabbing through me like a knife. I was sick, he said. I am sick. But there were good weeks, better months. I used them to see her. To see Ava. So the weekends you told me you were getting tests. When you said you were too tired to eat or walk. You were with them. He nodded once, slowly. Sometimes. I sank into the chair across from him, my hands trembling in my lap. Why? Why did you let me keep sacrificing myself? Why did you not just leave? Because I loved you, he said quietly. And because I needed you. That was the worst part. Not just the betrayal. Not just the lies. But the fact that he had looked me in the eyes day after day, and let me believe I was the only one. That all my pain and exhaustion meant something. That my love still mattered. You needed me, I repeated. But you loved her. You loved your other child. I did not know how to choose, he said. So I did not. You chose, I said, my voice shaking. Every single time you left this house and went to her, you chose. Every lie you told, every secret you kept, that was your choice. He had no defense left. He simply sat there, looking old and tired, the shell of a man I had once believed in. I wanted to scream, to break something, to walk out and never look back. But I was frozen. 10 years of caregiving, 10 years of devotion, did not disappear in an instant. My mind was still tangled in routine, in guilt, in the ache of love that refused to die all at once. So I sat there, shattered, as the man I had given my life to quietly confessed that he had never been mine to begin with. The life I had built, the future I had imagined, had already been claimed by someone else. I just had not known it yet. And now I did. Took me 2 days to summon the strength. 2 days of pacing the house like a ghost, sitting at the edge of the bed we had shared, replaying everything he had said. Every apology, every excuse, every lie. Could not eat. Could barely sleep. But I could not let it go either. I had to see her. I had to look into the eyes of the woman who had unknowingly shared my life. I needed answers that he could never give me. Not anymore. Not after everything he had hidden. Her name was Emily. Her email address had led me to a few social media profiles, and through them I found her. She lived 2 states over, in a small town not unlike ours. Her page was filled with soft photos of her and Ava, picnics in the backyard, birthday parties, sleepy selfies cuddled together on the couch. She looked warm, kind, so ordinary. And yet, she was the center of a life that had been built on my husband's deception. I sent her a message. It was brief, cautious. I told her I needed to speak with her about someone we both knew. His name and only his name. I did not mention what I knew. I only asked if she had time to talk. I half expected to be ignored. But the next morning she replied. She agreed to meet. I drove for 5 hours. The entire way, my heart pounded in my chest, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would say it, what I hoped to hear in return. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I saw her standing outside the cafe we had agreed on. She was holding Ava's hand. The little girl was bouncing slightly on her feet, excited, distracted. Emily looked anxious, her eyes scanning every face until she saw mine. When we sat down, I noticed right away how tired she looked. Not physically, but deep in the bones. The kind of exhaustion I recognized because I carried it too. We ordered coffee, made brief, awkward conversation. And then, with a deep breath, I told her who I was. I am his wife, I said. We have been married for 17 years. I have been caring for him full-time for the last 10. She blinked at me, her face going pale. No, she said. No, that cannot be right. He told me, he said you were an ex. That you left him after he got sick. I shook my head. That is not true. I never left. I have been there the whole time. I watched as her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then slowly to horror. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. After a few taps, she showed me a photo. Him, standing next to her and Ava, smiling with his arms around both of them. The timestamp was from 6 months ago. He said he was going to a clinic that week, I said, my voice barely audible. He told me he needed intensive treatment and would be out of town for days. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she set the phone down. Ava was playing quietly nearby, humming to herself. He was with me almost every weekend, she whispered. He said he was recovering, that the treatments made him tired. I never questioned it. He told me he was too weak to travel, I said. But he was flying to see you. We stared at each other, two women on opposite ends of a lie that stretched further than either of us had imagined. Piece by piece, we began to put it together. He said he met you at a conference, I told her. She nodded. That is what he told me too. He said you two had split up before he met me, that he was living alone, working remotely while getting his health back. He used the same lies, I said. Changed just enough to make it believable. We talked for hours. We compared stories, timelines, the things he said and did, the times he vanished without explanation. There were overlaps, inconsistencies, clues we had both missed. She had believed she was the only one, just like I had. When Ava was born, he had told Emily he was afraid to involve anyone else. He claimed his health was fragile, that stress would make it worse. He would visit them in short bursts, claiming medical reasons for the gaps in time. And when he was with me, he would sleep for days, claiming pain, weakness, exhaustion. He would weep sometimes and I would hold him. And then he would fly across the country and hold another woman, another child. I used to think he was so brave, Emily said quietly. The way he dealt with being sick, the way he smiled through it. I had no idea it was all a performance. He was very good at pretending, I said. I believed him too, even when things stopped adding up. Emily looked at me then, and I saw the same grief in her eyes that had lived in mine since the moment the truth came out. But underneath it, something else had begun to take shape. I feel stupid, she said, for trusting him, for letting him into my daughter's life. You are not stupid, I said. We both wanted to believe we were loved. That is not weakness. She nodded slowly, but I could tell the pain ran deep. It ran through both of us. As we spoke more, she shared stories that mirrored my own. The long phone calls that always ended when I walked into the room. The birthday presents that arrived late. The excuses, charm. The subtle gaslighting that made her question her instincts, just as I had questioned mine. He told me I was imagining things, I said. That my jealousy was the problem. He said the same to me, she replied. He said his illness made him tired, not distant. We were living parallel lives, both built around a man who knew exactly how to twist love into something he could use. He had carved a world from our devotion, a world where he never had to choose, never had to face consequences. Till now. We parted that day with an understanding that went deeper than words. We were not enemies. We were not rivals. We were survivors of the same manipulation, the same betrayal. And as I drove home, the ache in my chest had changed. It was still there, but it had a new shape. It had become fire. I was done mourning the man I thought he was. I was done doubting myself, blaming myself. He had chosen to lie. Chosen to deceive not just me, but a woman and a child who had given him nothing but love. He had stolen from all of us. Trust, truth. But he would not take one more thing. Not my strength. Not my future. He lived. That was the final truth. The one that refused to be tidy or poetic. After everything, after the betrayal and the confession, after the long years of caretaking and the unraveling of the life I thought we shared. He lived. The illness did not take him. In some strange, ironic twist, he began to recover. Physically, at least. His doctors adjusted his medications. His symptoms stabilized. And the man who had once been too weak to stand for more than a few minutes began walking on his own again, eating more, regaining strength. It should have been a triumph, a miracle. But by the time he was well enough to truly engage with the world again, that world had shifted under his feet. I was gone. I did not pack a suitcase in the dead of night. I did not scream or throw dishes or tear photos from the walls. I left quietly, methodically, like a woman who had been rehearsing her exit for years and only now realized it had been her right all along. I stayed long enough to help him transition into home care, arranging for a nurse to take over where I had left off. But I no longer washed his clothes or organized his pills or sat beside him through the long, dark nights. I had done my time. I had given him more than anyone else ever would. And he had broken that offering with both hands. I moved into a small apartment across town at first. It was nothing like the house we had shared. No garden, no guest rooms, no quiet hallways echoing with memories. But it was mine. The first night I slept there, I laid on a borrowed mattress in a room with blank walls and cried until I had no tears left. And then I woke up the next morning and breathed easier than I had in years. I started going to therapy. Not the kind I had once considered a luxury or an indulgence, but the kind that digs into your bones and pulls the pain out one memory at a time. I talked about the early years of our marriage. About the fear I had felt when he first got sick. About the guilt I had swallowed every time I wanted to scream or run or ask for something for myself. And I talked about Emily. About the day I met her. About the look in her eyes when she realized her life had been built on the same foundation of lies as mine. We stayed in touch. Not every day, not all the time. But enough. Enough to know we had not imagined what we went through. Enough to remind each other that our pain was real. That we were not to blame. Sometimes we would talk about Ava. She was too young to know the full story. Too innocent to understand the consequences of the choices her father had made. But she was loved. Fiercely. By the mother who raised her. And by the woman who once thought she would never be able to look at the child without seeing betrayal. Strangely, over time that feeling softened. I never stopped hurting. But the sharpness dulled. I no longer saw Ava as a symbol of what I lost, but as a child caught in the storm of adult decisions. I even met her once at a park, where Emily had invited me to join them. Ava showed me her favorite climbing tree, offered me half of her snack, and told me about a bug she had found near the slide. She had his eyes, but her spirit was hers alone, and I could not hate her for being born into a mess she never asked for. As for him, he did try to reach out. Few times. Letters mostly. Long, rambling ones full of apologies and explanations and self-pity. He asked for forgiveness. He asked if we could meet. He wanted to talk, to explain, to reconnect. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. I did not need to hear why he did it. Already knew. 'Cause he could. Because he thought love was something you earned through performance and could hoard like currency. Because he thought two women's devotion would somehow fill the void he refused to face in himself. But it never did. Never would. I went back to school. A short program at first, then a certification, and finally a new job. I chose something that helped people, not because I needed to be needed, but because it reminded me that kindness could still be real, that healing was not only possible but also powerful. I met people who had lived through worse, people who laughed again despite the scars. And slowly I began to laugh too. My parents were hesitant at first. My friends had drifted during the years I disappeared into my caregiving role. But once I reached out, I was surprised how quickly they came back. How much they had missed me. How much I had missed them. I began hosting small dinners, celebrating my birthday again, going for walks just because I wanted to. I started saying yes to things. No. Especially no. For a long time I measured my life by the things I had lost. Energy. Love. But now I began to count what I had gained. Clarity. Strength. A voice I had silenced for too long. I stood in front of the mirror one day and did not see a caregiver. I did not see a victim. I saw a woman who had been to hell and back. A woman who had survived 10 years of erasure and still found a way to exist. Matter. Sometimes I still dream about the life we had. The good moments. They are quieter now, like faded photographs at the back of a drawer. I do not deny them, but I no longer live in them. The last time I drove past our old house, the curtains were open. The light in the kitchen was on. I did not stop. I just kept driving. Because my story did not end in that house. It did not end in betrayal. It began again in pain, yes, but also in truth. I lost 10 years of my life. But I found my truth. And I will never let anyone take that from me again.